Welcome back. President Trump is taking action to combat what he calls anti-Christian bias in the U.S. During a series of events in Washington last week surrounding the National Prayer Breakfast, he signed an executive order establishing a new task force to eliminate anti-Christian discrimination within the federal government. Well, senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergner joins us now with more on this initiative. Tara, the executive order. Go ahead and tell us about it.
Indeed, the executive order highlights an increase in vandalism targeting conservative churches and pro-life pregnancy centers following the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. At the prayer breakfast last week, Trump criticized the Department of Justice, the IRS, and the FBI by name. He appointed Attorney General Pam Bondi to lead that task force, which will identify unlawful policies and practices across federal agencies and recommend further presidential or legislative action. It will also focus on investigating and prosecuting cases of anti-Christian violence and vandalism.
While I'm in the White House, we will protect Christians in our schools, in our military, in our government, in our workplaces, hospitals, and in our public squares. And we will bring our country back together as one nation under God with liberty and justice for all.
In addition, Trump is reviving the White House Faith Office to be led by Pastor Paula White, who previously advised him on faith initiatives during his first term. A senior advisor tells CBN that Trump has specifically directed the Faith Office to be located in the West Wing. The task force launches following Trump's pardon of pro-life activists charged under the Biden administration and after a 2023 House report revealed an FBI memo targeting traditional Catholics as domestic threats, Gary.
Thank you, Tara. Well, joining us now is Ralph Reed. He's the founder and chairman of Faith and Freedom Coalition. Yes. Ralph, you commended the executive order to create this task force. So why do you think this is something the president needed to do?
Well, I think it needed to be done because sadly and unfortunately, we have a great deal of evidence that under the prior administration and in some elements of the bureaucracy, that Christians and people of faith were being targeted. We know that the Richmond FBI office, in coordination with other offices, the Richmond, Virginia office, in coordination with other entities throughout the FBI, was suggesting that faithful traditionalist Roman Catholics should be surveilled as a potential domestic security threat. We know that the Department of Justice targeted parents whose only crime was to attend school board meetings and object to the teaching of the trans agenda to their children. And boys using girls' bathrooms, they were targeted. Boys using girls' bathrooms, they were targeted for surveillance and potential arrest and prosecution. So we need to make sure that Christians are not being persecuted, that they're not being targeted, and that the bureaucracy is not violating their First Amendment rights.
Ralph, what do you think this, some people who say that this shows favoritism to Christians, so what do you think? Is that any risk to Americans of different faith backgrounds?
No, not at all. Look, I've been a long-time opponent of religious bigotry and religious discrimination in all of its ugly forms, including anti-Semitism. I've partnered with organizations like the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith to oppose anti-Semitism. We oppose all forms of religious discrimination. But the specific issue here was that in a number of instances, Christians were being targeted. And they were being targeted for no reason other than their faith. It was based on their theology and their belief system. That's wrong. It's un-American. It should never happen in this country. And that's why I applaud the president for creating this task force. And I must say, as somebody who has known her and worked with her for decades, I can't think of anybody better to lead that task force than Attorney General Pam Bondi.
And what kind of action do you think we should expect to come from this task force? It sounds like President Trump has given it a high level of prominence with multiple cabinet secretaries involved.
Yeah, I don't want to prejudge it, but I think at a minimum, look, leadership begins at the top. And the fact that President Trump has made it abundantly clear that in his administration, the targeting and persecution and prosecution of Christians is not going to be tolerated, that's going to flow all the way down to the lowest rungs of the bureaucracy. And I think the days of Christians being discriminated against ended on January 20th when he put his hand on the Bible.
Okay, Ralph Reed with the Faith and Freedom Coalition, thank you for joining us.
You bet.